But speaking of people dying, I know Andre and I have been dying to talk about Hellraiser, and I know Chris saw it as well. I don't know about culture and script, but Psychotic says Hellraiser was good. What are the chances of getting more? I'm afraid to ask the Cenobite God for more. That's how we got the terrible sequels. That's a good point, Psychotic. And Andre, do you want to take this opportunity real quick to talk about a little bit of Hellraiser?
Absolutely. We'll get back to the question and the chances of getting sequels here. But what I will say is that I'm a huge fan of the Hellraiser franchise, all of it. Not just the movies, but also the comics. In fact, I think that the comics at their best are better than the movies. So yeah, I was greatly looking forward to this movie compared with it's my most anticipated movie this year, right alongside Beavis and Butthead to the universe.
Yeah, it's funny because this is the most excited I've ever seen you like a kid. Like the last 2 times this year, like Beavis and Butthead, we were both just like, chomping at the bit, waiting for it to drop. And then that's all I could hear you talk about Friday morning was Hellraiser.
Yeah. Friday to me was Hellraiser Day.
I don't usually get to hear Andre gripe too much. He doesn't bitch or piss and moan about things too often. But that was one of the few times I remember him going, fucking hell, I'm never going to have enough time to watch this movie before the show. He was pissed.
Yeah, like I was pissed because it was Friday and I had to watch The Rings of Power before the show. I should ideally have seen that Werewolf by Night thing. And I had to do the show and everything, so I couldn't see Hellraiser until after it. And I was like, so envious of everyone who got a screener, like Mr. Gore. I was like, why can't I get a screener of this thing? But anyway, I got to see it in the end. And before we get to my review, as someone who is a huge fan of the Hellraiser franchise, who was excited for this because I'm a fan of David Bruckner, and I am not one of the only Doug Bradley can be Pinhead class of people, basically. Doug Bradley is fantastic. He absolutely is. He's the perfect embodiment of that version of Pinhead. But Hellraiser doesn't begin or end with him. Neither does the character of Pinhead. So yeah, I'm very open for the new one. Before we get into my review, Mr. Gore, what did you think about it?
I was surprised by it. I enjoyed it. I didn't know this, but my understanding is that the Cenobites weren't necessarily described as having any sort of specific sex, right?
This is true. We actually did a video about this.
Yeah.
And when you compared to the original source book, The Hellbound Heart, Jamie Clayton, technically, because of Clayton's background, is a better fit for the Pinhead Cenobite character than was Doug Bradley.
So I was surprised. I thought it was a little slow getting started. Once it gets started, about midway through, it's good. For me, horror movies should be 90 minutes tight, as well as comedies, right? But I was surprised. I was surprised in the same way I was with Prey, which Prey turned out to be better than expected. So, and also the other thing is, I don't even know if we need to state this. I don't think that this Hellraiser was overly woke necessarily. And there were a couple.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. And there were a couple of kills that really shocked me, including like the very end is just some of it just really difficult to watch. So, I mean that in a good way, actually.
Yeah, like that's what the Hellraiser movie is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Cenobites are effectively walking autopsies headed to a fetish club.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that the imagery is horrific, and they really outdid themselves on the Cenobites in this. And what I like is like a lot was still left mysterious. They don't completely explain everything, which to me, that's a positive. So I was surprised. Like I say, I would compare it to my experience of seeing Prey, which I had no hope for and thought was going to be terrible, and turned out to be good. Not great, good. And I would say the same thing about Hellraiser. But Andre, You're the super fan. What are your thoughts?
I really enjoyed it, apart from one thing.
Uh-oh.
And that's sadly a big thing.
Uh-oh.
I wonder if it's the same thing I had an issue with.
Maybe. I haven't heard your review yet, so maybe it's the same thing. I really enjoyed the new take on the mythology. I thought that was inspired. I don't see this so much as a new take on the original novel, The Hellbound Heart. Similarities to that are obviously there, but you have to look for them, and they're like really subverted and stuff. This, to me, took more inspiration from Roman Polanski's The Ninth Gate. I honestly saw more similarities between that movie and this movie than I did with the book The Hellbound Heart. But so, to me, it seemed like a new take on The Ninth Gate in a Hellraiser wrapping. And to me, that really worked. So I liked what they did with the mythology. I loved the design of the new Cenobites. Again, that's actually closer to what was described in the original book than what we've seen in the earlier movies, for the very obvious reason that they didn't have the technology to do the kind of Cenobites that we see here at the time, because they're CGI augmented. They're not purely physical, all of them. They're CGI augmented, every last one of them, which you couldn't do in the 80s. So they had to change them into what you saw there, simply because that's something that could be done with the technology and the budget at the time. So all of that was good. I do enjoy all those aspects of the movie. I wish it had been more like The Ninth Gate. And this goes to the one thing that I did not like. The lead character, Riley. Not the actress, like Odessa Asian or whatever her name is. I thought she did a really good performance, as did everyone else. The acting in this movie, I thought, was really, really good across the board. And Asian did an amazing job acting out the character of Riley. Unfortunately, from my point of view, Riley, the way that she was written and directed, was the wrong character. Because here is basically a druggy, filthy bag lady. She reminded me of the Harfoots, like they're just filthy and disgusting all across the board. Like that sex scenes in the beginning. Like it almost gave me shivers down my spine in the worst possible way. I just kept like thinking, oh my God, what STDs must be transmitted there. And she was just such an unlikable lead character that we see the point of view from a druggie who's barely half conscious for most of the movie, and who can't do any proper exploration of the mythology or the world or anything like that. So I just hated the point of view character. Everything from
I didn't hate
appearance
her.
to clothing, especially those baggy trousers, like the ugliest thing I've seen.
My thing with her was like she was 12. Like she seemed like, I mean, she was like perpetually 12. Like the actress herself is in her 20s, but
the actress herself, I have no complaints with the actress. It's just the way
she was all right.
Was written. She ruined the whole movie.
My issue was, I don't think, Chris, you were going to say something. Go ahead first.
Well, no, I just think that there's been there seems to be an effort in Hollywood to desexualize women.
Well, they certainly succeeded with that here, because
in a lot of movies, and I've even seen it as like a trend, like we're just like, and so, she is very frumpy, so you're right in pointing that out.
Oh, they rose T-code her up. I looked at some pictures of her. She's a very beautiful woman. They rose T-code the fuck out of her.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I mean, literally, this is someone that belongs with the homeless people on Skid Row, and they just put her to lead the movie. And the movie has a theme of addiction, which I think is a questionable decision, but I really don't like the person that they had. I
didn't dislike the addiction thing. Makes sense, Andre, because that plays into
that works. That works. I could
the whole
live with
idea
that,
of somebody who would become enthralled with something like The Box, even though they know it. Like that in and of itself has always kind of been an allegory for like drug addiction, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I didn't love the movie. I didn't hate it. My short review of it Friday was it's about as good as the best sequels to the original film. My issue with it, first of all, is what Chris said. It's way too long. It drug the fuck out for 120 minutes. 90 minutes tight would have been just fine. There's nothing in this movie. This isn't The Exorcist. You're 100% right, Chris. There is no reason a horror movie should be more than 90 minutes unless it's The Exorcist. That was one of the problems with the Scream series. They got a bit too pretentious with the 2-hour fucking running times. You know, you got to get in and out with a scary movie. You're 100% right. Just like with jokes and set piece jokes or whatever, however you want to look at it in a comedy, it's the same thing with your horror films. Every 10 minutes, you got to have a kill. You get in, you get out after 90 minutes. You should know who that fucking killer is if it's a mystery by the third act. It shouldn't be a big fucking drawn out thing. You get it, you just do it. In this case, to me, it took away from the Cenobites. The Cenobites end up becoming more of a afterthought in this movie, and it's all around this one chick. And what's stupid to me is they go out of their way to make her boyfriend a bad guy when he doesn't really have to be.
Yeah, and also that was telegraphed so obviously, and
yes,
right there. And that's also my point, because like this lead character coming straight from Skid Row is so drugged out. Well,
sorry for the spoilers on that one. I kind of jumped to that. My bad.
Yeah, but anyway, like she's completely clueless and oblivious of her surroundings most of the time. So an extremely unlikable character to begin with. I completely agree that she would be like a first victim to get the chain started. But then you'd need a victim number 2, and maybe you follow that character instead of this one, because this is one of the most unlikable leads I have seen in a movie ever. And to the extent of which anything ruined the movie for me, it was the lead.
Well, and it wasn't a horrible film, like I said.
No, the movie's fine.
My other complaint was with other than the running time and those minor things, was the whole thing with Jamie Clayton. And if you go back to when she was announced, or they were announced as the lead, I said, I'm all for this if they actually go through all the way with it. They did exactly what I said they shouldn't do. Because in the book, the Hell Priest is described as basically a very feminine looking, the most non-androgynous looking of the bunch, actually, it seems like. And it is described as having the voice of an excited girl. Well, what they did here was they just gave Jamie Clayton basically Doug Bradley's voice.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the voice. They could have
the voice was the part that really bothered me. Is like, if you were going to do something, you could have had, and especially now with technology and somebody who used to work in sound and all that kind of stuff, but you can do all kinds of stuff now. This was kind of lazy.
It was another Cenobite who had a voice that would have been perfect for Jamie Clayton. So if you just switch the voices between the Cenobite that actually did sound like an excited little girl, then you'd be onto something.
And they didn't, I mean, and as far as the Cenobites go, like, again, if it were outside of Pinhead, this could have been any other sequel. Like, really, I mean, other than the lore, that was my big question, is they do dive a bit more into the lore here, and they
reinvent it.
That's what I was going to say. I don't remember a lot of these rules being this way because she would have been dead. She would have been one of the first victims if it was the old rules. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, you go ahead with the whole lore thing, because that's what kind of, I mean, I didn't hate it, but it felt like you're playing with the lore a little bit just for the convenience of story here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, because the original lore is that the box is the box, and there's 2 configurations of it. That's open and it's closed. And you really have to work at it to get it from a position of closed, which is just a standard box, to open it. And when you open it, well, that's when the Cenobites come. And if you are deceived into open it by someone else who's behind it all, we see this in the second movie, then Pinhead is going to stop it. It's going to be like, no, you who open it, that's coincidental. It's that guy over there. That's the one who wanted it open. So that's who we're coming for.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this whole movie is built on. Exactly. Yeah. And so it sets up the third act where she has to choose between 2 characters And that I didn't care for. I felt like this is a plot convenience.
Yeah. That actually is very much so in line with the original and the mythology. Like they're all about doing deals and trades and stuff like that.
So okay, fine.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine.
That's
that
what I was at. Like, because some of it felt like, yeah, this does not feel like, because I've watched all the films and I've seen the first, probably 2 the most. And it's not like I'm completely oblivious. I've just never read the book. I mean, you've told me a lot of stuff. I've heard from a lot of people about the book. I've read, synopsises and stuff of the book. But you actually, I think, finally sent me the book here recently digitally. But
yeah, I did.
I just haven't had a chance to read it. I wanted to before the movie, but it wouldn't have mattered because let's be real. This is not a remake. It's not a legacy sequel. It's not. At most, it's a reboot. Because it doesn't exist in this, like the director saying it exists in. No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
this is not any relation to the older films, but it could be, right? Because that's the thing with the Hellraiser films is the sequels are so unattached to anything anyway. That really I'm kind of scratching my head here going, well, if you're going to remake it, why didn't you just remake it? Because
well, that's kind of like what this is, only it's a different story. It's like it's a reboot, exactly as you say. It's a reboot with a brand new story, and if you squint, there are some similarities between this and the original book, but you have to look for them. So this thing that we were initially told that this is going to be a more faithful adaptation, no, that's total bullshit. The only thing that's more faithful is the visualization of the Cenobites themselves. That's more faithful, nothing else. And also, it's David S. Goyer. He's the one who basically did that made me cringe. Reimagining of this, and then David Bruckner was the one who just made it happen. So since it's Goyer, it's a Goyer-style reimagining. That's what this is. And again, I think it was really, really good. It was just brought down by the lead character. Like I would have liked someone else who, like for instance, would you have like this book where you have this Italian dude who has done all of the research and he's figured out all of the configurations and he has the names for them and everything. Maybe it would be better with a lead character that actually could read a little bit from this book and share some of this exciting mythology with us. Like I would like to know more about these different configurations and maybe hear more about what kind of gifts you get with each one. As it is right now, we know 2. We know if you choose the lament configuration, and this I liked, then you just get to go back to your mundane life.
This kind of simplified things a little bit.
Your whole life and those around you to go and live with that misery. That was pretty cool. And we know you definitely don't want to ask for sensation because the only thing the Cenobites can give is torture you beyond belief. This is also perfectly in line with the source material. And then get power. That's evidently how you become a Cenobite. So that's cool, but that leaves us with the 3 other configurations. What gifts were with those? I would have liked to know, just because it's cool.
Well, and bringing up that other
point, we had someone that wasn't clever enough to ask those questions, relay that information to the audience.
Well, and the other point I was going to make is it seems more like it's a remake of the sequel than it is of the first film in a lot of ways. There's I saw more.
It's a remake of the franchise as a whole.
In a way, yeah. But I feel like we missed an opportunity here because that first film, I feel like
we've missed so many opportunities in Hellraiser.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I mean, I don't know. This is one of those few times where it would have been like a remake of the original story. Resetting the entire franchise would have been a better thing. At this point, I'm not so sure because that was the question here on screen. Let's move to that. Do we think this is going to get a sequel? I mean, it was trending a little bit, and it's, rating wise, it's one of the better as far as critical of the Hellraiser films, I bet. But Chris, let's start with you. Do you think that this might lead to some more Hellraiser films?
Yeah. Do you think Hulu, where this is an exclusive in the North America only, do you think they will order another?
I have no idea. Because the barometer, it's very easy for us to go like, well, this made X number of dollars at the box office. It cost X. So, it will inevitably lead to another sequel or whatever, but we know that every streamer comes up with a way of measuring that everything is successful. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like when people present statistics to further an argument, they only present the statistics that help their case, and the way that the questions are even asked are very deceptive. I don't know about you guys. I'm being bombarded daily with text messages from, research groups and political organizations to give my opinion. Of course, I mark them all as spam, but that when they ask you to do a survey, it's simply to just further the way that they ask the question. So I kind of feel like when it comes to the streamers, they'll always say that everything is successful, even when it's not. The only thing we can reliably look at are, the box office, movie theater receipts. Yeah. That seems to be untainted. So I have no idea if this will lead to a sequel or not, because I don't know what the metric for success is. And it depends on also who's in what position of power to greenlight it, or what kind of sway someone, the other creatives behind the scene have. So I really don't have any insight that would be useful. So I'm being brutally honest here about that. So no clue. And as you pointed out, it kind of trended on social media briefly, and then we haven't heard anything. I mean, I hardly saw anyone do any videos on it other than the Film Threat channel and you guys.
Mr. H did one.
Mr. H, of course.
Mr. H.
He's like the foremost Hellraiser YouTuber.
Yeah, it was trending for a bit, and it was the top thing when I put Hulu on, and I even sent to Andre a screenshot of that or whatever. But to answer, I'm not sure. I don't think there was enough buzz. Prey did so much better than this. Like, there was a lot more buzz around Prey. I think that was a huge mistake of them not releasing it in theaters. But Andre, I have to say, outside of maybe doing a little bit more advertising push, I think Hulu did about as much as is expected. And at this point, I'm not so sure that was enough. I think we'll have to wait and see because does Nielsen, they cover Hulu as well, don't they, Culture?
Who? I'm sorry.
Nielsen.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem. Some of the services you get limited data from, and some of them you don't.
Well, they did do some of the other premiere movies, so I'm assuming they will this one too.
Again, I think we'll have some numbers, but it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks away. That's the other problem, right? Is the turnaround on that kind of thing, rather than the transparency that we require. And we're going to see more transparency. I mean, you and I have been talking about it as these platforms shift to ad-based tiers, and as the pool for advertising money gets smaller and the expansion of these ad tier groups get bigger, I have a feeling that Dutch auctions, like 3 years from now, advertising rates will take a massive hit, and because there's going to be fewer people consuming, even if it is quote unquote free on a ad based tier. Lots of these things are going to be driven by macroeconomics, and it's pretty soon it's going to be difficult for these services and even the studios and theatrical releases to prop up these numbers. But anyway, so that's my response.
DeGhost brings up an interesting point here. Being October, it should have been in theaters. Maybe with the dearth of entertainment that is out there, I don't think a small release of this film would have hurt it. But at the same time, I think Andre would be the first to say that I don't know if that would have necessarily cost them more money in the end or not, because Hellraiser is not Halloween.
Well, not only that, there's never been a sold out Hellraiser show.
No.
Nope. I mean, it's a very, very niche audience. I've seen 2 of them in theaters, and they weren't even half full, and this is like their opening night. I think it just has to do with the fact that as good as some of I think the first 3 were pretty solid films. I never got to see those in theaters. I was way too young, but when I did get around to seeing them, I thought they were all right. But I don't think they have the fan base to support like the mass marketing or even the.
They don't.
They don't. They're very niche, and so I think what it was able to do on Hulu, and streaming, I think was probably the smartest way to go, because it's a direct to market to your audience. Although I would have appreciated a theatrical run, but depending on how limited you make it, you're going to be asking a lot of your audience to probably drive very far out of the way to see the film, and now they have to contemplate, do I want to spend that long of a commute to see a movie, or I could just wait for it on streaming? mean, that's just the nature of the game. It's not the same type of genre as like Halloween, or like I remember when the Saw movies came out. The first one had on opening night had a half crowd, but the next night it was packed, and every October following that, always a packed house for every Saw movie. They leapt over the guard of what of gore and horror stuff that Hellraiser had done prior. It was just more of appealing to them. I don't know what it is for Hellraiser, why it's not done that, considering they've had more than 10 movies, I think, right?
This is movie number
11, I believe.
Yeah,
actually.
this is number.
Oh, okay, 11. Yeah. So
no, but I think your point you're making there, Script, is Saw had the commercial appeal that Hellraiser didn't, because Hellraiser had the BDSM bend to it, and that really makes it niche.
Yeah,
in a way.
There are not a lot of big fans of the BDSM out there in comparison, I guess.
No, that's like the thing. Hellraiser is inherently niche. It must be that way. It is that way. And the moment when you try to make it something less niche, you're going to ruin it. It's as simple as that. And this is something that our good friend and Hellraiser director and special makeup effects artist Gary G. Tunnicliffe has made very, very clear. Yeah. Hellraiser is niche. It's meant to be niche. It can't be anything other than niche. It can thrive when you budget it for that. Where you are doomed to fail is if you make it too big, when you need to bring in too many audiences. My worry here, though, in the case of Hulu, is that I don't think that this is the right place for it. I don't know the exact budget of the movie. I think the budget can be justified. I don't know that Hulu was the place, because I don't think it has the necessary install base. I would have preferred if it was in the US, something with a different structure, like Shudder, perhaps.
I was just going to say Shudder probably would have been better, because that would
have been a better home for
they would have really got behind this big time.
Exactly, because of Hulu's install audience. What's the overlap between the Hulu, those who have Hulu, and those who are Hellraiser fans? What's the overlap? And of those who are Hellraiser fans and that wants to see this, how many of them are going to get Hulu just for Hellraiser, as opposed to, Surfsharking it or something? That's
for the horror audience is very.
That's a genuine thing.
Here's one thing, though, Andre, you got to remember: the horror audience is very, very loyal. And they generally will go show up for a movie. And this is probably, of all the Hellraiser films, probably the most accessible by a commercial audience.
By far.
So in that respect, the Ghost, I want to say, I think if they would have done, especially considering there's nothing else out right now, if they would have done a limited type of release, even though Script is right on the traveling aspect, I still feel like they may have made a little dent, but I gotta hedge that in some way, because it's Hellraiser, right? It's not Halloween. You don't have a Jamie Lee Curtis you can pull out of your back pocket, right? And we got to remember, Halloween took everybody by fucking surprise. Everybody expected it to do okay, because H2O did well, but nobody expected it to do the level that it did. And I got to remind people, if you take away the two Rob Zombie films, that 2018 Halloween film outgrossed the entire fucking franchise as a whole. And if you even add in the Rob Zombie films, it's pretty close, because even then those are just because they were, newer modern films, and they made, I think, like 70 million and 30 million respectively. And you completely take out the second film, it still outgrossed them. But that second film just barely takes it over. But the second Halloween Kills did okay, but it did a simultaneous thing. And I think that's what Hellraiser could have benefited from, especially if Shudder would have got behind it. I think
match Shudder.
Go ahead, Chris.
A better match. When I think Hulu, I don't think horror. I think Hulu is sort of it's everything, but it doesn't have as clear a brand identity as some other streaming services. And actually, I will subscribe to Shudder every once in a while just to watch one movie. Right. It's like, because there's a lot of stuff on it, and it's not super expensive like an HBO Max. Probably no better time to subscribe to Shudder. Now, I get nothing out of this. I'm just saying, if you're a horror fan, a lot of good stuff on Shudder. Psycho Gore Man, which is freaking awesome.
Very cool.
I haven't seen that one, but I used to have Shudder and I loved it. But
yeah, you pay the monthly fee. It's less than you'd pay to buy the movie or rent it, you know? So there are like streaming services I kind of am always subscribed to. And then every once in a while I'll try one that's different just to check out what they've got. So, but yeah, no, I think that, and also I agree with your criticism, Andre. That lead girl was just she was not endearing or memorable or even likable in the way that like Jamie Lee Curtis is, like something about that first performance
or Ashley Lawrence for that matter.
Yeah, exactly.
In the original.
Just, there are, female leads of horror films that add more to the movie. They just do. And she added nothing. If anything, she detracted from it. So if
exactly.
Yeah. And that's why I think the first hour is so slow for this film. I don't care about her personal life in this. And she's sleeping with this dude. And there's like,
Yeah, her personal life is basically she's a druggie and she ruins her entire family. That's her personal life. It's like,
that's the poorest part of the story is all the characters, right? This is my biggest gripe other than that. Like none of them are real likable.
Right.
The brother is probably the only closest thing to a responsible, decent person in the entire film, and he's the first one who gets offed. They don't really establish the relationships of anybody. I mean, we know certain people are dating people, but other than that, we don't know why they're friends. Like,
right.
We don't know any of their status. They all are kind of just there.
We do know that.
Well, we know, who's fucking who, but that's about it. Like, other than that, all of us
know who's fucking who, and we know who's the roommate. There you go.
That's it. That's my point. Yeah. We don't have any idea of why they're friends. All of a sudden, the boyfriend or the husband, they don't really establish if they're married or not, but
they're boyfriends.
Yeah, I was gonna say, those two suddenly all of a sudden have this relationship out of nowhere. It's like, okay, you could have established that a little bit more in the opening if you're going to waste all this fucking time, because we have no real connection with these characters whatsoever. And then the only things we do learn about the characters either gets flipped on its head by the end, they get killed, and or it's just what you said. The most we get out of is the main character. We don't really get any personality bits out of her. All we get is that she's a former druggie and she's trying not to relapse, and she lives with her brother. No real personality aspects other than she's a slut.
And then she, let's not slut shame, but...
No, I'm not slut shaming, but let's be real. That's what the whole thing is. She's sleeping with this guy that her brother's afraid is going to force her to relapse because they both are in fucking group.
And he's right, because she does.
And you probably, and in most cases, they don't encourage that kind of behavior in a group anyway, but that's a total different discussion, I'm sure. But like, yeah. And then this guy, he's the problem anyway with the story, because to me, they go out of their way to paint him as a bad guy for no good fucking reason. They set this whole thing up like it'd be different in the beginning if everybody liked him and then he turned out to be a jerk. They set him up from the start to fail, and he ultimately fails. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing here for any of these characters that is like, at least with the original film, what's her face, the main character that they changed.
Lawrence, Kirsty.
That they changed. Yeah, Kirsty. That's what I was trying to say. At least Kirsty is somebody you can hang on to and you have a reason to follow her story, right? In this, like you said, your main character is unlikable. So what is the point of sitting through this movie? The movie technically was great. I'm sure they didn't have about $1.05 to spend on it. The guy playing the main antagonist was decent enough, I guess. The actors were fine, but it felt like something was missing. It felt flat. Like, so that's why I can't really recommend it. I'm in that 5, 6, 7. I can't give it a 7, but maybe a 5, 6 range. But that's even the best for most Hellraiser films, right? Like, so that's not great. You
guys realize you've talked me out of seeing this at all now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
That's the problem. I can't recommend it to anybody who's not a Hellraiser fan.
I can't recommend it either, because the lead destroys it.
Yeah, and still the first 2 movies are better than this as far as I'm concerned. Even Judgment might be better than this.
A number of sequels are better than this.
Wow.
I mean, if I have to recommend a movie to someone who isn't into gore and stuff like that, but like, what's the Hellraiser movie for you that's easy to get into? I wouldn't recommend this one.
Wow.
No, I'd recommend Judgment before this, to be honest.
So would I.
that doesn't speak well, right? And we have a person among us, not on the panel right now, but Mr. H, who again he knows a lot about Hellraiser. He's got a whole playlist dedicated.
If you love Hellraiser, you'll probably love this. There is a lot for a Hellraiser fan in here to love.
There is. So I won't discourage anyone from watching it. I'm just saying that this could have been a great movie for quite a few people, which is why I'm so annoyed with the lead, because the leads just ruined the movie to me.
Well, and it's actually not even the actress's fault. You're right, Andre.
Again, it's not the actress. It's the way that
she is probably one of the better actors in the film.
She is. I mean, if she had just been told, okay, you can be an ex-user, but you can't be straight from Skid Row. So we're going to do something with your hair. We're going to give you some other trousers that don't look like they reek, so you can smell them.
Well, that's just it. They that's what I was trying to say, Andre. There is no reason for any of these characters to give a shit about her.
No,
right?
There isn't.
And they all, for some reason, treat her. They don't show us any reason why. Like even her brother is. I mean, the whole setup of the intro is him kicking her ass out. Right? Like, I'm sitting here trying to fucking fathom this, because she is a very, like I said, I looked up the actress because, like I said, she seemed way too young at first. I'm like, what the fuck? This actress just seems way too young to be around these other adults. Because she does. She carries herself and it looks like she's 12. And I looked up the actress and I'm like, what the fuck did they do to her? They clearly Rose Tico'd her.
Oh,
because she's a very beautiful actress.
No actress has been Rose Tico'd as badly as her. I mean, when you had like this pretty actress who was playing Ugly Betty here a few years back, ain't nothing compared to what's done here.
Well, and Script may be able to help me out here, but like, here's the thing: you can have a character who's very flawed like this, which I'm glad they did. For once, we have a female character lead who's not a fucking Mary Sue, who's perfect at everything. But you have to give the audience something to attach to, something for them to see that, okay, this is why these people keep putting faith in this person. You have to give them some kind of trait or something about them that makes them likable. Here, you don't have any of that. She's kind of an obnoxious bitch to everybody from the start. Not obnoxious, but like passive, and she's just kind of there, and I don't know how to explain.
Let's put it this way: I just wanted the Cenobites to take her the first thing they did, so we can move on with someone else.
It's wow. Over the course of the last 24 hours, it's not a trending thing, really, for this film. Outside of like the early trends that came over for this thing. I'm looking at reviews now for the film, and those aren't in any way.
They strap them down, Eldritch. If she's got titties, you wouldn't know it.
I don't think there's going to be a sequel. I don't think that this is going to get the kind
Chris
of
was
numbers
say
on
something.
Hulu that's needed. Sorry, Chris, carry on.
No, real quick. When you saw the apartment, I literally thought to myself, I can smell the BO and patchouli.
Exactly.
It had that kind of vibe, but just like, I mean, look, it's important to have likable characters, and she wasn't likable. That's just, that's it. I don't know that any of them were, like, to me. Like,
the bad guy was probably the most interesting character.
Yeah. Like,
the Voight guy. Is that his name? Voight?
Yeah. And Chris, you mentioned just you could practically smell the apartment through the screen, right? That's perfect embodiment of my problem with that character. When she was in like those disgusting, filthy clothes, looking all filthy, like I could practically smell her through the screen in the worst possible way. And that sex scene at the beginning, that's one of the most off-putting, disgusting things I've seen for that very reason.
Yeah, how do you make an off-putting? I mean, that was an off-putting sex scene. It was certainly
have someone straight from Skid Row be in it. Well, that's practically what they did.
It looked like homeless people banging.
Yes,
in a tent in downtown Los Angeles, which I can see without subscribing to Hulu. I can just drive there. So it was that's what I'm saying is, once it got away from the story of the characters, which I didn't care about, I literally, you picked up more than I did. I didn't care about any of them. Like, I thought, these are annoying people. I would never be friends with people like this, or they're not even annoying in an anti-hero way, or like, where you kind of like, well, they're the protagonist. I'm on the journey with them. But there is an effort, seems to be, to make women less sexy in movies. That just, I don't know, that's like a post Me Too thing that happens more often than not, as far as I'm concerned. And there's been way more. I've seen more penis this year than I care to ever see. Probably at the movies since maybe gym class,
right?
Junior high and high school, where we had to shower, and I was kind of not into that. But in any case, not that I don't like to shower, just not with a bunch of dudes. So never played sports. Doesn't mean I wasn't physical, just team sports not for me. Very weird aside to just say that more men are sexualized in films now. Look at Flicking Too Much, right? In Thor, where he's effectively, you see his ass, he's naked. You see, look at you've seen a lot more men and a lot more penis this year than any other year that I can remember in film. And that used to be a rare thing. Used to be
You're
rare.
right. Well, the MPAA used to come down hard on penises.
So to
like
speak.
you would never, ever, ever see a hard penis, let's say, for instance. And you would definitely you would rarely see a soft penis, for instance, like you're saying too. But here's the thing with this one, Chris, and this is my last gripe about the film, because I do have some positives I want to say real quick before we move on. My only other gripe is that of all the Hellraiser films, there's no sexuality in this movie at all. Considering how many people we know who are technically fucking each other in this movie, and it pretty much opens up with a sex scene, with introducing our characters. After that, there's no sexuality in this movie, and that's kind of one thing Hellraiser's known for. And I don't mean like in that overt way, but I mean
sexual and sensual.
Yeah. The sensuality of it all, it's all, none of that's there. Like that aspect of the Cenobites is completely gone. It's like you have the most androgynous Cenobites of all time, and it is the least sexiest of all the Hellraiser films.
Yes.
And it's not just because of that, it's all of it together. But now there's my positive though. The Cenobites and the lore. I love the Cenobites. I thought they looked amazing. I love the designs. Even on the budget they had, I'm sure even Gary would be impressed by that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what he thinks.
Yeah. As far as the lore part, like you said, Andre, I wanted more of that. Once we got into that aspect of the film, then I was interested. Then I was along for the ride.
Yeah.
The first 20 minutes or so are the rough part. After that, the intro.
To be clear, I want a sequel. I want a part 2, because in this revised lore and in these designs, there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot to explore here. I want this to be a thriving franchise now that we can move on to a different lead in part 2. But I'm afraid we're not going to get it because of Hulu.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's probably the case. And I'm with Chris and on this one. Shudder would have been the home for this. They would have got behind it. They would have advertised the fuck out of it. They would have at least give it a fighting chance anyway. In this case, though, I don't see that. But yeah, I can recommend this if you're somebody who's into really cool special effects. The horror fans are very forgiving. Like, and that's probably why this movie's getting such good praise among, the masses as far as on Twitter and other places, because as far as horror films go, oh yeah, this is actually a pretty good horror film. And I know Chris can probably back me up on this, because there's several levels of shit when it gets to horror films, because you've got straight to video, and then you've got like probably should have never even been put on video, period. As far as the level, and this is at the higher level of, you could have probably put this in the theater level, and that's saying a lot for a horror film. And this is from a horror fan.
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't know why they didn't just release it in theaters. Even if it was limited release, like 600 screens or 1,000 screens in the US, it probably would have done well, because people want to see new horror. Smile, which is a very average to not great horror film, is #1 at the box office 2 weeks in a row. Now, the bar is very low. We're seeing the worst box office in 25 years. When they look at like what the amount of money that collectively films made in 2022, it's going to be terrible. There is a long road for Hollywood to come back and win back the public's trust. And I think that if you look at theaters, movie theaters, like a streaming service with content, it may be, if you look at it that way, you've got all your options, right? Look at movie theaters as if it were a streaming service where you can see movies at the theater, right? It's probably wouldn't be one of your favorite channels or one of your favorite services. So yeah, I mean, look, for me though, I feel differently. You know, movie theaters, going to the movie theater to see a film is, I mean, that's like my church. So I go more than once a week, at least. But yeah. I don't see any reason why, you know, both Prey and Hellraiser could not have had some small release. I don't know why they didn't do it.
Yeah, that's the biggest praise I can give this movie, is it was at least worthy enough of a theatrical release. I will give it that. And I don't know if you noticed this or not, Andre, but they did not list Jamie Clayton as Pinhead in the cast. It's as the priest.
I didn't notice, but I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's more and more established that the name of the character is the Hell Priest. That's the name that Clive Barker himself gave in the follow-up book. What's it called again? Scarlet something. Not a great book, but anyway, Hell Priest is like the name he canonized for the Pinhead character. So I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So with that, let's move on though. But if you're a horror fan, I think you'll enjoy Hellraiser. If you're a big Hellraiser fan, I think you'll enjoy it. But the casual audience, not so sure on.
It's worth seeing for the effects, for the designs, for the mythology. Shame about the elite.